Hello, I'm Adam,
And I'm Adrian.
and welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today we're going to talk about critters.
Everyone's favorite uh
Eh, Favorite not
Gremlins
Gremlins, yeah.
ripoff. Yeah. Favorite discount Gremlins film.
And I think this is the most popular of all the Gremlins ripoffs. Not that they're crazy popular, but I think most people have heard of Critters, but I don't think most people have seen Critters. I hadn't seen Critters before you told me you wanted to talk about it, so.
Really?
Yeah, I'd never seen this movie. This was a first for me.
I had never seen the entirety of this movie, but I was very familiar with it through, I guess, just memes.
Yeah,
We talked about kind of the influence of Gremlins and just how many creature features of this kind Gremlins spawned. And there was, of course, ghoulies, troll, hobgoblins, munchies,
there was a hobgoblin.
critters. There's hobgoblins. Munchies is another one that I'm acutely familiar with. I guess I could go on and on, but Critters, of those, I'd say, is not only the best film, but it's also the most known of the not sequels to
Yeah,
Gremlins.
I can't speak to the success of the other ones, but I don't think any of the Gremlins ripoffs had much success. But Critters spawned a whole franchise, so
It did.
in that regard, this movie was absolutely successful.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're at 6 now, and I own 4 of them on DVD.
Have you seen all four of those?
No, I've seen I think maybe the first 2.
I,
Um,
I can't imagine watching more than just this movie.
yeah, I can't either. That was another one of those. I'm a sucker for walking into Walmart, looking into the bargain bin and paying, $10, walking out with 4 DVDs. I love to do it. It's a hobby of mine because the stuff that you find, and I did find the New Line Cinema New Line Cinema's 4 film favorites Critters collection.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I found out that there were more of these movies than those 4 at a Half Price Books by chance. I saw a very modern looking Blu-ray copy of like Critters 5.
So it's going
And
strong.
it's going strong. It's going strong. But I can't say that I know much more about the franchise outside of this first film.
1 second. I'm
Yeah.
gonna look this. Yeah, the most recent Critters movie, Critters Attack, came out in 2019. So this franchise absolutely has not lost steam and is still to this day alive and well.
Isn't that insane?
I can't believe it. Freaking Critters.
I simultaneously can't believe it and also can. Did you have a good, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but did you have a good time watching this?
I could not. I don't think I'd watch another one. You know what I mean?
Ah, that's fair. I see the appeal though.
Yeah, I guess.
I enjoyed it.
There was a lot of things I went into this movie thinking this movie would be like, and then found my perception to be wildly off. First of all,
Yeah.
I thought this movie was going to be some really low budget, shitty B movie ripoff of Gremlins, and I found out its budget was way bigger than I thought it would be. It had $2 million ish of a budget, which is really saying something for a horror movie from 1986. That's a lot. And this movie does not look good enough for that budget.
Oh,
I don't
see,
think.
I was gonna say that I think that budget shows. I think it shows. I don't know. The '80s was ugly. Like
That's
everything
true.
that came out of the '80s was ugly, and I don't know. I can believe it. I can believe it fairly easily that this was about a $3 million budget.
2 million.
Oh, the figure I had was like 2.8, something like that.
Oh well. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We're both rounding, but nonetheless, yeah, this movie is fun. I'd say I like it. But that's because I think I just like what this movie presents itself as in the first quarter. and then I really like what it becomes.
I think it begins out of nowhere. I expected,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know what
fair.
I
That's fair.
expected from the plot, but Gremlins, critters, some little critters coming up and being evil. I had to double check that I was watching Critters because it begins with a sci-fi space
Yeah.
dogfight.
As
And
I said it, I realized it does open like on an asteroid prison.
yeah, I was like shocked. It was so not what I expected. Evidently, the critters are aliens. They're like exactly Stitch. They do exactly what Stitch does at the beginning of Lilo and Stitch, and the difference is that they're consistently evil. There's more of them.
Yeah.
But I was so shocked. I couldn't believe it opened with this space fight.
Yeah, I know. I had completely forgotten that that happened. Yes, it is insane. Um, so I guess to briefly give a synopsis of the opening of the film, we start off on this base slash like high security prison that is built into an asteroid, and we are very quickly introduced to these aliens that are called Krites. So we're introduced to the Krites, and we learn that the Krites somehow are able to escape this facility, which then, of course, prompts a fugitive storyline, I suppose. And we meet these two bounty hunter-esque characters that are shapeshifters, and they are literally watching music videos. A music video of this made-up rock star named Johnny Steele, and that's who they use as their reference to shapeshift, or at least one of them does.
Yeah, it's this duo, and one of them,
Yeah,
for some reason, they have this bit that he can't like properly shapeshift into anything, and he always looks weird. For the first part of the movie, his head is just a green blob, and then he has the head of a dead person, so he doesn't look real. And I don't know. The whole bounty hunter alien side of this movie is so weird, and I so did not expect it.
it's really bizarre. I do kind of like where it goes though towards the end.
I do too. Yeah, it feels very like unattached to the critters, to the rest of the movie. It doesn't make sense, but at the end of the movie, you are on board with it.
Yeah.
You're glad. The I guess a little bit into the story. After this crazy space fight, the critters crash land on Earth, and we get a good like 20-ish minutes of just this Kansas farm family just living their life on the farm. You're introduced to the whole family, all these characters. There's a character I think named Charlie, is it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
his name is Charlie McFadden. He's a mechanic.
Yes. So there's a character named Charlie McFadden who the movie cannot really decide if he's just like the town loony or the town drunk or anything, or like what they don't really, his deal is not exactly concrete. It's not consistent, but he's somehow not a reliable narrator. I guess you can't trust anything he says, and nobody believes him, and he's always talking about how aliens are beaming messages into his head. So of course, when the aliens come, he is the one that sees it, and he's trying to tell people. Nobody believes him. He's very much filling that role that like the crazy drunk neighbor in Gremlins filled, where he's crazy and telling everybody about how Gremlins are real and nobody believes him, and then Gremlins coincidentally are real.
It's a carbon copy of that character.
Yeah, it's exactly that happening.
The difference being that it seems that the son in this movie, the child that we follow through a lot of it, his name's Brad, has like he's friendly with Charlie and cares about him.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the only real difference in this dynamic.
Yeah, Charlie's a mechanic that works on the farm with the rest of this family. And you just getting into this farmer family plot, you quickly forget about the sci-fi portion that you just saw, because this is what you expected Critters to be. You expected it to be a household being invaded by a bunch of evil little dudes that they have to fend off. And that is what the movie is after we get this weird alien plot. But then for the rest of the movie, there are these bounty hunters trying to find the Krites. And it's really, really strange. But that's the basic plot. That's a rundown.
Yeah, I mean, and there are honestly, there's not a large cast of characters here. We do have the core family, and we have the father's name is Jay. He's like your classic Southern dad, really hard on his son, has a soft spot for his daughter. You have the mother Helen, who's like living her life and is basically very comfortable, kind of filling that Southern house mother role. And then the two kids, there's April, who is the older sister to Brad. And those are the protagonists that we have in this movie. For of course, I guess we have protagonists slash villains with the bounty hunters that we follow.
Yeah, and part of the reason you aren't on board with the bounty hunters at first is just because they're kind of aimless and maybe villainous. Like they're just going around town destroying things basically. And then by the end of the movie, they kind of just do a 180 and turn them into the heroes. And like they're cool all of a sudden. And I like it when they're just bizarre, cool 90s aliens. Or I guess in this case, 86 aliens.
Yeah, I do too. And I really like the imagery that they have at the end of the movie, because one of them, he was watching, I guess, like MTV or whatever, and saw a music video, and there's this fictitious rock star named Johnny Steele that he shapeshifts as. And that's already funny because it's this guy with 80s hair walking around in this ridiculous alien garb with a Ghostbusters-esque like hose gun thing that he's walking around with. And then later on, his partner, he takes the form of a police officer, and then also later on a preacher that they find. And just the dynamic of these two shape-shifting creatures kind of just taking shape based off of the townsfolk. I thought it was funny. I thought it was charming.
Like at first you really just think you try to bat it off as an annoying B plot, but it becomes more and more relevant and they lean into it more and more, and so you accept it and it evolves and you enjoy it by the time the movie comes to a close.
Also there's an interesting a Critters series that streams.
Wow.
And so there's that to talk about too.
There's so much. I can't believe that how prolific this franchise is. The cult following really must have just held this up. Like that is a dedicated fan base to keep this alive.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, I guess I'll continue talking about the plot.
Yeah.
Okay, well, like I said, we're introduced to this family. They're all just doing normal stuff. It's the very typical family: conservative dad on a farm, a promiscuous teenage daughter, and then her snotty little brother. She brings her cool little boyfriend over to dinner, who's got this big fancy car, and her dad clearly doesn't approve. And after dinner, her brother, who's grounded, watches them from a window sneak off into the barn so they can get the hanky-panky on. But while he's staring out the window, him and his dad both notice a starship crash off in the distance somewhere. And they go to investigate, and they don't find a starship, but they find a dead cow whose bones have been picked clean. They're starting to freak out. Meanwhile, this is when our bounty hunters crash land on Earth. They take the forms of, hair metal rock stars. And they start going through the town, causing havoc, just asking people at various local establishments where the Krites are, and nobody knows what a Krite is. And then they just shoot something or blow something up and then move on. And cut back to the farm. They have encountered the Krites. That's where the Krites are. These critters are coming in. And let's talk a little bit about their designs, their effects. How did you
Yeah,
feel about how they looked?
terrible. They're terrible.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
They look like horrible. Um, I not joking when I say this. I think they maybe just for 80% of the shots in this film that show the critters, you don't see their faces. You literally see balls of fur. Right? I mean, is that an exaggeration? I don't
No,
think it
you do.
is.
Well, they more or less are just balls of fur, but I think for all these action shots, they do just kind of roll a ball of fur. It's just looking at the critters' design. I don't know if I think that might be the most known thing about this franchise is how the critters looks. They're like more sinister versions of Fizzgigs from the Dark Crystal. They just look like furry balls with teeth and a devious smile. And from the design alone, you can see like that's why I thought this movie was so cheap, because they clearly designed a creature that is easy to make and manipulate on camera. Like the design itself is so half-assed for lack of a
Oh
better term.
yeah. No, without a doubt. I mean, it's the critters themselves are incredibly low effort. You could tell they did very little on them, and even in the scenes where you see them, like you said, with their toothy little grins and their red eyes, it's nothing incredibly interesting to look at. Um, and the critters are violent. They do attack several people. The way that they attack is that they will pretty much latch onto you and just like burrow into you with their teeth.
Yeah, or they might
Effectively,
shoot a quill out of their back that
yeah,
is poisonous, and it seems to like just knock people out or
yeah. They're
paralyze
also
them.
part porcupine.
Part
And
poisonous corp. Yeah.
why are we both struggling to say that word? Porcupine.
Part poisonous
Um,
porcupine.
yeah, yeah, and that's funny because the first person that gets got by the critters is edgy boyfriend.
Of course.
But he only gets mauled. He gets eaten. They don't establish until well after he is dead and well after the critters have attacked some of the family members that they can shoot these quills out.
Yeah, and I love the scene where they attack this boyfriend. This poor cannon father boy. This boyfriend, like in any other horror movie situation, you want this tropey boyfriend who's there to get eaten. You want him to be like a jerk. You want him to be some, ostentatious, loudmouth guy that nobody in the audience is supposed to like. But this guy is perfectly normal and likable.
Yeah, he's pretty unassuming actually. Like the whole time that they're at the dinner table with April's parents, he's complimenting April's mom's cooking. He says that it's one of the best meals he's ever had. And she's creeping her hand up his leg. And he's like, no,
Yeah, it
stop.
feels like
Not here.
she's pressuring him into everything.
Yes, the whole movie too. Like even whenever they go to the barn, he's like, I'm allergic.
He's like, I'm allergic to hay. I don't know if this is a good idea. Would your dad like us doing this in his barn? And like, doesn't want to do it. And she's like, come on, get in here. And then what does he get for it? He gets a critter to the throat. That's what he gets.
Yeah, he dies.
The poor.
And he dies a terrible death.
I know, it sucks. I would like to point out though that immediately after the dinner scene is when they go into the farm to get it on. Then we go to see the spaceship, find that cow, go back home, discover there's critters, and also while there's all this stuff happening in town, there's a good like 20 minutes between when we see them going into the farm and when we actually see the critters get to them in the farm.
Oh yeah.
And this 20 minutes represents what seems to be hours in the film. But they continue this shot like immediately afterwards. They're still in that farm. And it's like, they're only just now getting into the sex after what was probably like 2.5 hours of being in a farm. Like in this barn. They were not doing anything else in this barn, surely. So the timing there is really off.
Yeah, that part is goofy as hell. You cut back to them like 30 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
And
You
they're at
forgot
the
about it.
same stage.
Yeah. And then they gotta rescue her. And then but after he's dead, this family unit is who the movie focuses on for the rest of its runtime. And it really the movie seems to care about this family, maybe more than the audience does. Uh
Yeah.
I really didn't care about April. Like she could have been dead, but our little scamp Brad was doing God's work. I feel like Brad was I forget his name, but the main character in Gremlins, we talked about how he was supposed to be a child, like a little kid, and then they ended up making him like a college aged guy. I feel like Brad is the little kid that the Gremlins protagonist was supposed to be. And they do a good job of establishing him. He's the
He's
character
what
you
Billy
like the
should
most.
have been.
Yeah, he's absolutely what Billy should have been. His name's Billy. You're right.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I think you're right though. Yeah, I think the kid in this movie's fine. Like the kid that plays Brad, I like him. I like the relationship he has with his parents. You know, him and his sister, they have your average 1980s brother-sister relationship. It's nothing to write home about. It's nothing that makes this movie more interesting. But I think that they're not a detriment to this film.
No, I don't either.
I can give them that.
I think April's probably the worst actor out of everybody in this family. But they do a good job of establishing the relationship between the father and this son. You really get they do a good job of conveying that like frustrated child who is just having trouble interacting with his family. And then this crisis brings them all together. And he picks up the flack, he saves the day. It's great. And this is another part where it's being Gremlins and it's like a weird family friendly kind of family themed movie, but also was a sci-fi before this and is also supposed to be a horror movie. Sometimes this movie feels like it's made for children, and then other times you have the critters making raunchy humor jokes and, you know, dropping F-bombs here and there.
Yeah, they curse. They
curse.
speak.
Yeah, that's another thing is they're aliens and they're like sentient, conniving alien creatures who communicate to each other and speak and have their own language.
Yeah. How bizarre is that?
It is because they speak to each other like they're sentient and are occasionally sentient, and then the rest of the time they're just wild monsters who could just very well be creatures, you know?
Yeah, they kind of established that out of nowhere as well.
It is.
The big finale of this movie is super ridiculous because the entire film, the entire run of the film, these critters are ruthless. They kill the livestock. They kill everybody that they can. But for some reason, there is like the alpha critter who is huge, by the way. All of the other critters are these tiny little balls. But the alpha critter is just this man in a grimace suit covered in fur that is now kidnapping April for some reason. They never actually state why they want to take her alive specifically.
Yeah, they eat everything else mindlessly and immediately, but her. This part of the movie, this is towards the end, is where all the logic devolves so quickly.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I think they say they can grow. We got to kill them before they grow. And then there is one, like you said, alpha critter that's huge.
What was up with that?
Well, they don't establish that only he is special. They establish that any critter can do that, and only one of them has done it for some reason. And then when they do take April back to the ship, we see that a few others have also gotten huge like that, but they just stayed on the ship. It makes no sense. We don't know why they're even trying to leave Earth, because at first they sort of imply that the whole point of critters is that they find a planet and they devour everything and then they move on to the next planet. And here they leave. I think maybe they're trying to escape the bounty hunters, but they didn't care about the bounty hunters before then. all the logic of this movie falls apart so quickly in the final act, but the final act is also, I think, where this movie is at its most fun, where it's
Oh
just
yeah.
critters running around being evil, space bounty hunters shooting at them. Things are exploding. There's like a million explosions. That's probably what they spent this whole budget on. This
Mhm.
is where the movie's fun, and this is, it's critters. It's a cheap Gremlins knockoff. You do not care about the plot.
No.
So it works. It really does work. I'm glad there's an alpha critter. I'm glad he steals April. I'm glad all the nonsense chicanery that happens here happens.
Yeah, and I mean, the big thing that like I don't want to dance around is that the two heroes of this movie are the drunk mechanic and the little kid. And they, of course, rescue April and then like use firecrackers to attack the critters on their ship. And that doesn't go over well. Like I think Brad makes a pretty big mistake with his firecrackers and he loses them at one point. But they, after they get April, the critters, the Krites, if you will, they're gonna leave and they try to blow up the farm, this humble Kansas home. And Charlie, of course, who has been drinking the whole movie, fashions a Molotov cocktail out of the whiskey bottle he carries with him and throws that into the ship and detonates the firecrackers that were left on accident, the firecrackers that Brad had dropped. And that's what actually kills the critters.
And how
And it's
ridiculous is that too?
oh. The thing is like I feel like my description of it doesn't even do it justice.
No.
Like you have to watch it to even believe that it happened on screen.
The ship flies off and explodes like the Death Star. And it's
Yeah.
ridiculous to think a singular firecracker and a Molotov cocktail blew that ship up like that.
Right. Considering that the firecrackers weren't even able to blow up the critters when they swallowed them.
Have you seen a firecracker before?
I have.
They're not. You can't blow things up with that. Like you
No.
can't destroy a spaceship with a firecracker.
No, you cannot.
But
No, you cannot.
in this movie,
But
I
it
guess
happens
you can.
here. And of course, that's your big, grandiose finale. But at the very end, because this is a movie that spawned 5 sequels and a series, which we'll talk about in a second, there are eggs seen inside the barn at the end of the movie. And we know that the fight is far from over.
Yeah, amazing.
I wanted to talk about
Yeah.
the influence of these movies, first of all, and also the continued influence that this franchise has.
Yeah, this is, like I said, one of these cult film franchises that personally I can't believe is as big as it is. Like the fact
Yeah.
that I've even heard about Critters is crazy to me. And a lot of people have. Like I've heard people talk about Critters. And
Oh yeah, Critters it's a B movie classic.
I can't believe it's a B movie classic though. It really feels like it should have no success, but here we are. And I'm glad it is. I'm all for it.
Oh, me too. Me too. I mean, I love stuff like this. I love creature features and I love bad ones at that. Yeah, so now I don't want to get this wrong, but I believe there are 5 Critters movies.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's also a web series that was made I think in like 2019 or maybe early 2020 that premiered on Shudder. Are you familiar with Shudder?
Yes.
Yeah, it's that horror streaming service for those that don't know. And it's from what I've heard, the show is not good. I do not think it's still running. I do know that Gilbert Gottfried was in it.
Amazing.
He was like one of the people that they got to do it. And I also know that it supposedly was a bit more tongue in cheek than the Critters franchises, though this all feels very self-aware to me.
It has to
Personally.
be to an extent because
Yeah, you can't take this seriously. There's no way. There's no way in hell the people making this movie were like, "Oh yeah, we got a classic."
how tiring would it be to take this seriously too?
Yeah, that's a
Like,
good point.
don't put energy into it. This is a turn this movie on, turn your brain off kind of movie. You know, it's critters. It's like I keep saying, it's critters. It's not a big deal, you know.
Yeah, it's really not. And I think that's the appeal of these types of movies.
Yeah, that's the beauty
There's
of it.
Yeah, there's not a lot to care about, but you can turn it on and it'll hold your attention. Um, I don't know, at 85 minutes, I think is what this movie clocks in at. I'd say this is like the perfect runtime.
Oh yeah, yeah. A short runtime too, short, sweet, to the point. The one thing
Yeah.
I honestly wish I had more critters. That's my one complaint.
Yeah, I agree. I think they do get bogged down in the bounty hunter storyline.
Yeah,
The bounty hunter storyline that I did not expect.
yeah. That's another thing. It detracts from the critters, and you didn't going into it. That's not what you pay, you know. That's not what you paid for. That's not what you expected to see.
Exactly, exactly. But I can't really complain. I mean, I personally had a good time with this movie.
No, I did too.
Yeah, I think you did as well.
It
It's no Life Force.
it is no life force, to be fair, but
That's for sure.
I think it also kind of took a little too long to get into the critters, into the
Yeah,
action.
I agree with that. Yeah.
But I don't know if these characters recur in the other movies. I think it will be worth it. But if not, and they probably don't, then you know you could have taken a little less time establishing that this is a happy, typical, realistic American rural family. You know, we get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know if they stick around because I really don't know. Um,
Brad does, evidently in Critters 2 at least, and so does Charlie, and those are our two main driving forces of this movie, so fantastic.
yeah, there you go. Where did you watch this movie?
Bootleg that shit, I'm sorry.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did. It wasn't on Tubi.
You wouldn't steal a car, buddy.
Well, I wouldn't
But you would
steal
bootleg Critters.
Yeah, I wouldn't steal a car, but I might steal like a rusted muffler from like a dump. And I think that's what this movie is. So
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I have the box set, which might as well be stealing because it was like $2 and some change. So for the cost of a kolache,
I like that.
I now
At these
own
low prices, it's practically stealing.
I now own these 4 film favorites, as it says in big red letters on the box.
Well, we can watch 3 more Critters movies now, so I'm so glad.
We might have to. We might have to. All right. Well,
Was that all your thoughts on Critters?
yeah, I think we said it all.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say. It's Critters.
It's worth the watch, is in my opinion. It's worth the watch.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right, well, it might be a short episode, but you know.
It's fine.
To quote
just like this
Forrest Gump-
movie.
Yeah, just like this movie. To quote Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. So we'll close the book on Critters. Thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Adrian, for joining me.
Hey, buddy, cheers to you.
Thank
and
you.
cheers
Hey.
to the critters.
Right back at you. And thank you everybody for listening. Goodbye.